In the winter of 1980, a team of engineers climbed inside the Statue of Liberty to find out why she was rusting from the inside, and what they found should not have been possible. The iron skeleton holding her up had been quietly eating itself for almost 100 years. Some of the iron ribs had lost half their thickness. Hundreds of the rivets pinning her copper skin in place had already been pulled clean through the metal. The cause was not the weather, and it was not old age. It was a mistake built into her in 1886, the moment two different metals were pressed together and left to sit in the salt air. Iron and copper, a little moisture, and the most famous statue in America had slowly turned into a battery, feeding a current that ate it alive from the inside. The green skin everyone photographed looked perfect. The bones underneath were dying. This is the story of how Lady Liberty was built, how that flaw stayed hidden for 3 generations, and the desperate rescue that finally saved her. To understand how the most recognizable symbol of freedom in the world ended up secretly destroying itself, we have to go back more than 100 years before those engineers ever set foot inside her, all the way to a quiet dinner party in France. In 1865, the American Civil War had just ended, and slavery in the United States was finally over. Across the Atlantic, a French law professor named Edouard de Laboulaye sat with friends and floated an idea. France should give America a monument, a gift to mark the friendship between the two nations and to honor what the war had just settled. Laboulaye was no idle dreamer. He led the French Anti-Slavery Society, and the statue he imagined was meant to celebrate liberty and the end of bondage. That is why, if you look closely at her feet today, you will find something almost no visitor ever notices. A broken chain and a shackle, half hidden under her robe, trampled beneath her step. The Statue of Liberty is, quite literally, stepping out of chains. The man who would turn that idea into copper was a sculptor named Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. He was young, ambitious, and he thought on a scale that frightened other artists. Years earlier, he had tried to sell Egypt on a giant lighthouse shaped like a robed woman holding a torch at the mouth of the Suez Canal. He even had a name for her: Egypt carrying the light to Asia. That project died for lack of money, but the idea never left him. He had studied the lost wonders of the ancient world, especially the towering colossus of Rhodes that once stood over a Greek harbor, and he wanted to build something that would make those old legends look small. So when Laboulaye described his monument, Bartholdi already knew exactly what it should be: a colossal woman, a Roman goddess of liberty, lifting a torch to light the world. They gave her a formal name that almost nobody uses now: Liberty Enlightening the World. There is a small mystery here that we went back and forth on for a while. For generations, people have said the calm face of the statue was modeled on Bartholdi's own mother, a woman named Charlotte. The longtime historians of the monument lean that way, and there is a story of the sculptor quietly confirming it to a guest at dinner. But the curator of his own museum in France has flatly rejected the claim, and the honest answer is that we do not truly know whose face she wears. It is one of those details that everyone repeats, and almost nobody can actually prove. What we do know is that nobody on Earth had ever built anything like her. And before Bartholdi could raise a single sheet of metal, he had to answer a question that had no answer yet. How do you build a statue as tall as a building, ship it in pieces across an ocean, and stand it up in an open harbor without it tearing itself apart in the first storm? Solving that would take 4 different men, 2 countries, and more than 20 years. and one of those men would make a single decision that nearly killed her. Let us start with the part of her you can actually sewer: the skin. Today, the Statue of Liberty looks like a single solid figure cast in green metal. She is nothing of the kind. Her entire surface is copper, and that copper is shockingly thin. Each sheet was hammered down to less than 1/10 of an inch, about as thick as 2 pennies pressed together. If you could peel her open and lay her skin out flat, the whole outer shell of the most monumental statue in the world would weigh only around 30 tons. A figure that looks carved from solid bronze is, in truth, a hollow shell you could dent with a hammer. The method they used was old, and it was brutal. It is called repousse. Sheets of copper were heated and then beaten by hand against carved wooden molds until they took the exact shape of a fold of cloth, a lock of hair, a single knuckle. This happened in a cramped workshop in Paris, on a street called Rue de Chazelle, run by a firm named Gautier and Company. More than 60 craftsmen worked there, swinging wooden mallets over more than 300 separate copper sheets, sheet after sheet, year after year. Tickets were even sold to walk among the half-finished pieces, an arm propped in one corner, a giant copper face leaning against a wall, scattered across the workshop floor. If you love the kind of engineering history that almost nobody else bothers to tell properly, do us one quick favor and subscribe before we go any further. We put real weeks of work into digging these stories out, and it honestly helps the channel keep going. Now back to how Bartholdi actually pulled this off. Here is the part that still amazes engineers today. To shape a statue this enormous and keep every proportion perfect, Bartholdi could not simply eyeball it. He built her in stages. A small clay model first, then a larger one, then a quarter-size version, and finally the full figure, each step scaled up using thousands of careful measurements. Some accounts put it at around 9,000 separate measurements for a single section of her body. He was doing by hand, with plaster and plumb lines and wooden frames, what a computer now does with three-dimensional modeling, more than 140 years before that software existed. He paid for all of it as he went. To raise money, Bartholdi finished the torch-bearing arm first and shipped it across to America, where crowds paid 50 cents to climb a ladder up onto the balcony at the Great Fair in Philadelphia in 1876. A few years later, her head and shoulders went on display at the World's Fair in Paris, where visitors could walk up inside her and look out through the windows of the crown. People were paying to stand inside a statue that was not even finished yet. And for a while, the upper half of her loomed over the rooftops of Paris. Long before she ever saw New York, the body of the Statue of Liberty rose straight out of that workshop and towered over an ordinary city neighborhood. One reporter wrote that it looked like a factory of dwarfs building a giant. Victor Hugo himself came to see her near the end of his life. The skin was coming together beautifully. The problem was that a skin this thin could never hold itself up. A hollow copper shell of robe and arm and crown, rising 300 feet into the air, would crumple under its own weight and tear apart in the first hard wind off the water. Something had to hold her up from the inside, and that something is where this story turns dark. The first man asked to solve the problem was a famous French architect named Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. He was a legend in France, the man who had restored the great cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. His idea was to fill the lower half of the statue with a heavy pier of brick and sand and anchor the copper skin to it, almost like veins running through a leaf. It might even have worked, but we will never know because in 1879, with the statue still unfinished, Viollet-le-Duc suddenly died. He left behind a half-formed plan and no clear way to hold up the upper body, the arm, or the torch. The man who replaced him changed everything. His name was Gustave Eiffel, and within a few short years, he would build the most famous tower on Earth, the one that still carries his name over the Paris skyline. In a real sense, the Statue of Liberty was his warm-up. The very ideas he tested inside her, he would soon stretch 1,000 feet into the sky. Eiffel, working with his brilliant young engineer Maurice Coquelin, threw out the heavy brick plan entirely. Instead, he designed something that had almost never been done before. He built her a skeleton. At the center of the statue, Eiffel raised a tall tower of riveted iron, close to 100 feet high, braced like the pylon of one of his great railway bridges. That central tower was not solid. A double staircase wound up through the inside of it, the same long climb that visitors still make to reach the crown today. From that central spine, Eiffel hung a secondary framework, a web of flat iron bars bent to follow every curve of her body. There was more than a mile of iron bar inside her. And here is the clever part. The copper skin was never bolted directly to that frame. Instead, each sheet was attached using small U-shaped straps called saddles, around 1,500 of them, fixed with some 300,000 copper rivets. The iron skeleton carried all of the weight. The copper simply hung on it, the way a coat hangs on a wire frame. This was a genuinely new way to build. The outer shell carried nothing at all, and the structure hidden inside held everything. It is one of the earliest examples in the world of what we now call curtain wall construction, the exact same idea that would later let crews throw skyscrapers like the Empire State Building straight up into the air, a story we have covered in its own film. In a strange way, Lady Liberty was a skyscraper before skyscrapers existed. Eiffel did one more thing that mattered, and it is the reason she is still standing. He refused to make her rigid. He knew that a stiff statue in an open harbor would crack apart from the wind, and from the way metal swells in summer heat and shrinks again in winter cold. So he built her loose, on purpose. In a strong wind, the Statue of Liberty actually moves. The body can sway around 3 inches, and the tip of the torch can swing 5 or 6 inches through the air. Her iron bars are designed to flex and spring back, so that she bends instead of breaking. It was brilliant, and buried inside that brilliance was the single mistake that would nearly destroy her. Here is the mistake. To build his skeleton, Eiffel used iron. To make her skin, Bartholdi used copper. And when you press 2 different metals together and add water, you do not simply have 2 metals touching. You have built a battery. It sounds strange, but it is basic chemistry, the same chemistry that runs the batteries in your remote control. Put iron and copper together in salt air, add a little moisture, and a faint electric current begins to flow between them. The 2 metals are not equal in that exchange. One of them is sacrificed. It slowly corrodes, and it feeds the other. Inside the Statue of Liberty, the iron skeleton was the metal being eaten alive, a little more every year, at every single point where it touched the copper skin. Engineers have a name for this slow death between 2 unlike metals. They call it galvanic corrosion. And in the 1880s, almost nobody building a great monument was thinking about it. Eiffel was not a fool. He understood the danger. So at every joint where iron met copper, his team slipped in a barrier, a layer of shellac-soaked cloth, meant to keep the 2 metals apart and keep the moisture out. On paper, the problem was solved. In reality, they had set a timer. That thin layer of shellac-soaked cloth was the only thing standing between the statue and a reaction that would never stop on its own. And over the decades, it would not simply wear away. It would slowly soak up salt and water like a sponge and hold that moisture right against the iron until the very thing meant to protect her was quietly helping to kill her. As long as it held, she was safe. The day it failed, the most famous statue in the world would begin to destroy itself from the inside, deep in the dark, where no one could see. Nobody alive in 1886 understood how long that timer would run, or how much damage it would do before anyone noticed. They were far too busy with a much louder problem. They still had to get her across the Atlantic Ocean and stand her up. And that was about to become a disaster of its very own. By 1884, the statue was finished in Paris. To send her to America, the crews did something that still sounds insane. They took her apart. The entire Statue of Liberty was carefully disassembled and packed into 214 wooden crates. The most recognizable figure in the world was reduced to a giant, numbered kit of parts, like furniture, waiting to be assembled. 36 of those crates held nothing but rivets and bolts. The crates were loaded onto a French Navy ship called the Eiffel. The crossing very nearly ended the whole project before it began. The Eiffel sailed straight into a violent storm in the Atlantic and almost went to the bottom with the Statue of Liberty packed in her hold. She survived, and in June of 1885, she sailed into New York Harbor to booming cannon salutes, with steamships sounding their whistles and cheering crowds packed along the shore to watch her come in. After more than 20 years of work, Liberty had finally crossed the ocean and arrived in America. There was just one deeply embarrassing problem. There was nothing at all for her to stand on. A quick word before we go on, because the second half of this story is the part almost nobody tells. Every one of these documentaries takes us days of research to get right, and we keep them completely free for everyone to watch. If you want to help us keep making them, you can support the channel through the link in the description below. Even a small donation genuinely keeps this whole thing going, and we are grateful to every single person who chips in. Now back to that missing foundation. The deal had always been simple. France would pay for the statue. America would pay for the pedestal she stood on. But while France delivered, America stalled. The fundraising for the pedestal dragged on for years and then ran out of money entirely, with the base only partly built. The crates sat in storage on the island. For a while, it looked like the gift from France might rot in its boxes because America could not be bothered to finish the foundation. The man who saved it was a newspaper publisher named Joseph Pulitzer. He ran the New York World, and he turned the whole thing into a public dare. He promised to print the name of every single person who donated, no matter how small the gift, and he offered a tiny statue in return for $1. It worked beyond anyone's wildest dreams. More than 120,000 people sent in money. School children mailed in pennies. One small gift arrived as 60 cents, sent in the donor's own words, as the result of self-denial. 80% of all the donations were smaller than a single dollar. Pulitzer sold a flood of newspapers along the way. But the point is this: ordinary Americans, a few cents at a time, paid for the pedestal that the wealthy had refused to fund. That pedestal was no small thing either. It was set inside an old, 11-pointed, star-shaped fort on Bedloe's Island, the little island in the harbor that would one day be renamed Liberty Island in her honor. And Bartholdi had chosen this very island himself, years before, on his first trip to America. The moment he sailed into the harbor and saw it sitting there, empty and perfect, he knew he had found her home. The base swallowed 27,000 tons of concrete, the largest single mass of poured concrete anywhere in America up to that time. It was a record that would not be beaten until the giant dams of the 1930s, like the one we covered in our film on the building of Hoover Dam. The walls of that base run up to 20 feet thick, faced with granite hauled down from Connecticut. When they laid the cornerstone in 1884, in pouring rain, they sealed a copper box inside it, a time capsule. They had given her a foundation that you almost cannot move. Then came the most dangerous part of all, standing her up. Because of the shape of the pedestal, the crews could not build scaffolding around the outside of the statue as she rose. So they did it the hard way. Steam-powered cranes and derricks lifted each numbered section up the pedestal, and then workers climbed the iron skeleton and hung from ropes off the statue itself, riveting her copper skin into place piece by piece, 150 feet in the air, with almost nothing to catch them if they slipped. The work ran right through the summer and into the autumn of 1886. The labor was done mostly by immigrant crews, many of them Italian, for very little pay. When it was all over, the man in charge of the construction stood up at the dedication and declared that not a single life had been lost building her. It was not true. A 39-year-old Italian laborer named Francis Longo had been crushed to death when an old wall collapsed on him during the work. History remembered the speech. It almost completely forgot the man. On the 28th of October, 1886, in a cold rain and heavy fog, the Statue of Liberty was finally unveiled to the world. President Grover Cleveland came in by boat. New York threw a celebration so wild that office workers tore the long paper tape out of their stock machines and threw it from the windows, the very first ticker tape parade in the city's history. And yet, on a day built to honor a giant female symbol of liberty, almost no actual women were allowed at the ceremony itself. A group of suffragists, furious at the hypocrisy, chartered their own boat and circled the island in protest. All of this, they pointed out, done by men, in honor of a woman, to celebrate a liberty that real American women did not yet have. For her first years, the Statue of Liberty also carried an official job that most people have completely forgotten. She was a lighthouse. The government placed her under the United States Lighthouse Board, and her torch was wired with electric arc lamps, which made her the first lighthouse in all of America ever lit by electricity. It was a wonderful idea that did not really work. The light was simply too weak. Ships could barely make her out from 24 miles away, and as a real guide into the harbor, she was close to useless. She even had her own keeper, a man named Albert Littlefield, who lived out on the island. But after about 16 years, in 1902, they finally gave up and shut the navigation light off for good. There was something else that nobody expected. When she was new, the Statue of Liberty was not green at all. She was the warm brown color of a fresh copper penny. It took nearly 30 long years of rain and sea air for the copper to slowly grow the soft green coating we all know today. And that coating, the patina, actually protects the copper underneath it. The skin, it turned out, could take care of itself. The bones could not. Then came the night of the 30th of July, 1916. A few hundred yards from Liberty Island, German saboteurs blew up a massive munitions depot in what became known as the Black Toem explosion. 2 million pounds of munitions went off at once. The blast was felt as far away as Philadelphia. It shattered windows all across New York, and it even registered on distant instruments like a small earthquake. Shrapnel tore into the statue's raised arm and her torch. The damage cost about $100,000 to repair, and Germany would not finish paying for the sabotage until 1979, more than 60 years later. And from that night to this very day, the torch has been closed to the public. Nobody has been allowed to climb up into the flame since. After the Black Tom blast, a sculptor was brought in to redesign the damaged torch. His name was Gutzon Borglum, and just a few years later, he would begin carving 4 enormous presidential faces into a granite mountain in South Dakota, the project we told the full story of in our film on Mount Rushmore. Borglum cut away much of the original copper flame and replaced it with hundreds of pieces of amber glass, around 600 of them, lit from inside so the torch would glow at night. It looked beautiful. It was also a quiet catastrophe. The glass leaked. For decade after decade, rain and melting snow seeped in through Borglum's torch and ran straight down into the arm and into the iron skeleton, feeding the exact chemical reaction Eiffel had tried so hard to prevent. The statue was now being attacked from 2 directions at once. Salt air working at her from the outside, and fresh water pouring in from the torch above. In 1931, crews added bright new floodlights to light her at night, and to run the wiring they cut fresh openings into her, a few more small wounds in the copper. We are honestly curious what you think so far. Out of everything battering this statue, the salt air, the fierce harbor winds, even saboteurs with 2 million pounds of explosives, what do you think did the most damage to her over the years? Drop your guess in the comments, because we read them. And stick with us, because the real answer is stranger than any of those, and it was hiding inside her the whole time. Crews patched her up here and there over the years. In the late 1930s, work teams replaced some of the rusted iron and tried to seal her against the weather. But again and again, they made the very same mistake. They treated only what they could see, and they covered the rest with layer after layer of paint and tar. Underneath all that paint, hidden from every visitor and every keeper, the iron skeleton just kept rusting. The battery never switched off, and by the time anyone finally went looking closely, the damage was almost beyond belief. By the late 1970s, engineers knew something was wrong, and as the statue's 100th birthday approached, a joint French and American team finally climbed inside to find out how bad it truly was. What they discovered in 1980 turned the birthday celebration into an emergency rescue mission. The iron skeleton Eiffel had designed was severely corroded. In places, the flat iron bars had lost as much as half their entire thickness, eaten away by the century-long reaction with the copper. Hundreds of the connections had failed. Rusting iron swells as it corrodes, and that swelling had pushed and pried until many of the saddles holding her skin had bent and cracked, and around 600 of their rivets had been torn straight through the copper. The saddles that Eiffel had so carefully designed to let her flex had rusted solid, so instead of sliding, they simply tore. In the worst spots, the iron was so far gone that an engineer could crumble a piece of it apart in his bare fingers. The structure holding her together was, in agonizing slow motion, pulling itself to pieces. Then computer modeling, brand new at the time, revealed something even stranger. She had not just decayed. Parts of her had been built wrong from the very beginning. Her head had been set more than 2 feet off-center. Her raised arm sat about 18 inches away from where Eiffel's own drawing said it was supposed to connect to the central tower. And because of that error, every single time the wind made her sway, one of the sharp points of her crown had been quietly cutting into the metal of her own raised arm. Now, There is a popular story that a greedy contractor secretly stole a third of her rivets and sold them for scrap, and we looked hard at that one. It does not hold up. The truth is stranger and much better documented. Eiffel's original drawings still survive, and they show the arm was moved late in the process, marked in red ink, most likely at Bartholdi's own request, to make the pose look a little better. The sculptor had quietly overruled the engineer. The arm went up in the wrong place, and then she was left to slowly saw away at herself for the next 90 years. In the summer of 1983, the front page of the New York Times laid the whole thing out for the entire country. 13 separate trouble spots on the most beloved monument in America. The engineer brought in to lead the structural work summed up the heart of it in one plain sentence that says everything. "Put iron and copper together with a little moisture," he said, "and you get a battery." 100 years too late, someone had finally named the flaw out loud. Saving her would take a huge international effort and one of the most careful restorations ever attempted. Between 1982 and 1986, that French and American team essentially rebuilt her from the inside out. One by one, they removed Eiffel's corroded iron bars and replaced each one with a matching bar of stainless steel, the modern grade engineers call 316L, which would not feed the same deadly reaction. They never took out more than a few bars at a time, so the statue never lost her shape or her strength. It was slow, painstaking work, done by hand, high up inside her, for nearly 2 years. This time, the crews could finally build proper scaffolding, and they wrapped the whole statue in it, from her feet all the way up to the torch. Where the old shellac and cloth had failed, they separated the two metals with a modern barrier of Teflon, the same slippery material that lines a non-stick pan. Cleaning her was its own strange problem. To strip a century of paint and tar from the inside of the copper skin without harming it, they blasted the interior with liquid nitrogen. To clean the grime off the outside, they used so much baking soda that the lead engineer joked they were running the world's largest Alka-Seltzer. And the leaking glass torch that had poured water into her for almost 70 years was finally retired for good. They built a brand new flame, covered it in a thin layer of 24-karat gold, and lit it from the outside, exactly the way Bartholdi had wanted it in the very beginning. The old torch now sits in the museum down at her feet. On the 4th of July, 1986, the Statue of Liberty was reopened to the world for her 100th birthday, healed from the inside, her brand new golden flame burning over the harbor. Tall ships sailed in from around the world, and the celebration ran for days, a weekend the whole country called Liberty Weekend. The crowds who came to cheer her had no idea just how close they had come to losing her entirely. And that is the strange truth at the very center of her whole story. For 100 years, the part of the Statue of Liberty that everyone loved, the green skin, the calm face, the lifted torch, was never really the part in any danger. The copper could have stood for 1,000 years. What almost killed her was the part that nobody ever saw. The hidden iron skeleton that held her up was the very same skeleton quietly destroying her. A brilliant design and a fatal flaw built into the same body, eating itself alive in the dark, while the whole world stood outside, taking photographs of the surface. She is still standing today, only because a handful of people finally went looking underneath the skin, found the battery running inside her, and shut it off just in time. So the next time you see her, remember that the real strength of the Statue of Liberty was never in the famous face that you can see. It was always in the hidden bones that you cannot. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the deep engineering history that almost nobody else bothers to dig into, then subscribe and stay with us, because we have many more just like it on the way. And if you would like to help keep these documentaries alive, that support link is waiting for you down in the description. We will see you in the next one.